Let's try a problem together that covers concepts that show up between 9 and 13% of the time on the AP Calc exam. If you'd like to try the problem on your own first, go ahead and pause the video now to go ahead and do so. Otherwise, let's go ahead and try it together. The table below shows the selected values for a differentiable and decreasing function f and its derivative. So the table we're talking about is this thing right over here. If g of x is equal to f inverse of x for all x, which of the following is a correct expression for g prime of 2? First, by definition, it's good to know that if you take a function f and you write a composition between it and its inverse, so f of inverse of x, you will always get x. Now, in this particular case, we know that this f inverse of x is the same thing as g of x, so we can go ahead and make a substitution and say that f of g of x is equal to x. Next, if you take our equation and we take the derivative of both sides of it, we're going to see that on the left side we have the chain rule because we have a composition of functions. We have our outside function and our inside function. So if we apply the chain rule here, we would take the derivative of the outside function, which is going to be f prime of g of x. And then the derivative of the inside function, or that g of x, is just going to be g prime of x. Now for the right side of the equation, the derivative of x is just going to be equal to 1. So we're trying to get this g prime of 2 alone. So notice that we have this g prime of an x value here. In order to do that, let's go ahead and divide both sides by this expression over here. And if we do that, we're going to get g prime of x is going to be equal to 1 over this f prime of g of x. At this point, this is where a lot of people might end up getting stuck. So let's go ahead and take a look at our table to see how that can help us since we haven't looked at it yet. Looking at our table here, let's just focus in on our top two rows. If we look at this x value and this f of x value, we go ahead and say that we know that the point 0, 8 exists on this particular f function. So we can also say that f of 0 is going to be equal to 8. Looking at these two values of 2 and 5, we know that 2, 5 is a point on this function, and that f of 2 is equal to 5. And looking at these two numbers of 4 and 2, we know 4, 2 is on this function, and that f of 4 is equal to 2. Now the reason why this is important is that if we know that g of x is the inverse of f of x, then we know that we can actually come up with some other points here and say that if we know that f of 0 is equal to 8, that means g of 8 is going to be equal to 0. If we know f of 2 is equal to 5, we know that g of 5 is going to be equal to 2. And finally, if we know that f of 4 is equal to 2, we know that g of 2 is going to be equal to 4. So these three bits of information tell us 3 points that are on this g function, but which one is important to us? Well, notice we're looking for this g prime of 2. So we're looking for an x value for the g function, which is 2. Here's an x value of 8, we don't want that. Here's an x value of 5, we don't want that. But we do like this x value of 2. So let's go ahead and plug in 2 for our function on g, because we know that 2 is going to be an x value that's on there. So substituting in, I'm going to go ahead and say this is going to be g prime of, and I'm going to keep the same color I used for that g function. G prime of 2 is going to be equal to 1 over, we're going to have f prime of g of 2. So let's go ahead and plug that in as well. Now, we know that g of 2 is equal to 4. So let's go ahead and plug that in as well. We can simplify this and say that g prime of 2 is going to be 1 over f prime of 4. All right, so we're almost there. Let's take a look and see, what is this f prime of 4? Well, that's a derivative of this f function when x is equal to 4 on that graph. Let's see here. If we look at our table, we can see here that we have a few different values here. So when x is 0, we know the derivative of the f function is going to be -1. When x is 2, it's going to be -2. When x is 4, the derivative is going to be -5. So I think we want this x value of 4 since we have this 4 here. And if we go ahead and plug that in, then f prime of 4 is going to equal -5 here. So making that substitution, we're going to say this is going to be equal to 1 over -5. So we can say this is going to be equal to -1/5. Now if you go ahead and look at our answer choices, see, it looks pretty good here. That'll be our answer.